most people, most creators in general, err too much on the side of caution. And they're so scared about getting canceled still that their content doesn't have any meat to it. It doesn't have any real substance to it. And it could be with an interview. It could be with the stuff that they film when they film themselves. I think that the whole point of podcasting and content in general is to get your opinion, your point of view, your personality. When everyone says be authentic, it means bring your whole self to your content. I think bringing a spiky point of view and a perspective that you stand behind is a good thing. And I think that also lets people challenge your point of view. Healthy debate is how we educate and how we learn. Like, to not bring up issues means that we're almost like ignorant to the facts, and we're ignorant to other ideas and opinions. And when we're ignorant, that's what creates divisiveness and hate. It's not having great conversations and understanding someone else. It's when we ignore their points and we mute them and we shut them off and we live in these echo chambers of similar thought. That's what creates anger and hate and divisiveness.
Great title for a podcast, Blessings.
Thank you. Yes, I love it.
What a great meditation.
We are here to learn in the spirit of life.
I'm all about believe. You're about spreading blessings. It's great.
What about your blessings? What's the biggest blessing of life?
What a great question.
Because it's the Blessings podcast, I have to ask you, what is your biggest lesson in life?
My biggest lesson in life.
A whole lot of conversations with people about life and how those things manifest as blessings and lessons, and sometimes both. It's my connection.
You're going to get schooled.
The journey is the journey.
What you and me are searching for are the blessings in this life.
Remember the reality of how sweet people are.
Spread blessings around the world.
You are the most remarkable energy. You make me pause, make me excited, make me think, and make me spontaneously come up with an answer. This is another one of those great moments in time in my life. Thank you for reaching out to ask if I would do the show.
Welcome back to Blessings, my friends. Today, I'm sitting down with the host of a top 10 business show, the Success Story podcast. He has interviewed the best of the best in business, wellness, and across all industry, all the gurus and household names. He's an entrepreneur, an investor, and an author. And he's built a newsletter with an impressive 321,000 subscribers and building. And he's like an encyclopedia of entrepreneurship, which we are so privileged to be able to tap into. He's also the king of the cold email. And I think it was by following his advice that he accepted my invitation so graciously to be here with us all today. I'm so psyched to welcome Scott Clary to the show.
Thank you for having me. And you are very kind and generous. I do not claim to be the king of the cold email or an encyclopedia of entrepreneurial knowledge. These are not things in the bio on my website. I know a couple things, but thank you. That's a very kind intro.
I write my own intros in case you didn't notice. So I'm a big question kind of girl. And I would love to just dig right in. So I know you are known for your business content, and on your show in particular, you do interview a lot of really big names. But I noticed that in your more recent episodes, you've got some wellness experts and some spiritual leaders. Now, this is my thing. I love that world. And you had Dr. Berg. I use his electrolyte powder every morning. And you also had Dave Asprey, just to name a couple. So I'm wondering, what lights you up more? Is it the health experts, the business experts, or the spiritual leaders?
That's a great question. I've never consciously thought I need more spiritual leaders on the show or I need more health experts on the show. My thesis is that anybody who's succeeding financially, which is the thing that we all chase after, for better or for worse, if we're going to talk about what makes us comfortable and what makes us fulfilled and happy, and how do we fulfill Maslow's hierarchy of needs, right? From a psychological principle, we have to make a little bit of money to have a roof over our head, to have shelter, to provide for ourselves, to provide for our loved ones. But then after we get that little bit of money, then I think that many people feel lost because we spend so much time chasing after that money, and we condition our entire lives around tradition, focusing on money and business success, entrepreneur success, career success as a KPI in our North Star. And then what ends up happening is we forget about all the other aspects of our life. So we forget about our mental health, our physical health, our spiritual health. And I don't pretend to be experts in any of these to any degree compared to the people that I bring on my show and I speak to. But the goal of the show of Success Story is to understand that all these different components of our life are very important. They've all had an important part in my life. And outside of just financial success, if I don't have spiritual, mental, and physical health, my life seems very meaningless. And I've seen it not only with like my little bit of success that I've had with my career, but I've seen people that have sold companies for tens and hundreds. And I know people that have not sold companies, but are worth over $1 billion. That's usually multiple companies and ventures that leads you to that number. And not all the time, but sometimes they've only focused on financial success and a lot of the other areas of their life are lacking. And that's when they're depressed and they have anxiety and they're not sure why they aren't fulfilled after hitting this incredible windfall and this financial milestone. So I think the goal, to come back to your question, is what's the most important? I think they're all important. I think they're all very important. And I include aspects of spirituality and, again, mental, physical health into my life every single day. And I think that's how you achieve balance, to constantly upskill and learn and educate yourself and expose yourself to ideas across all the areas of human development, if that makes sense. So I think that the goal is to show successful business leaders, but also show people who listen to the show how they can excel across all these different areas of their life so they don't wake up one day with a ton of regret and anxiety and depression, which does happen with people that have huge financial success. I think I was reading, I'm going to blank on the name of the company. Basically, it was a founder. It was like over $100 million exit. And I could find the name of the company if you gave me 2 seconds, but I can't remember off the top of my head. But I remember reading a blog that he wrote. And it was basically like his entire life. He was young, but his entire life was building this company, sold it, depression, because he focused on nothing else, because he just focused on that financial metric. And you see this quite a lot. That's why you have broken homes, multiple divorces, no relationship with kids, people that are physically out of shape and they make money and they realize, I don't want to die, so I have to get into good physical shape. All of these ideas I think are important for true success. And that's really the message that I'm trying to bring across.
I agree with you wholeheartedly. I think that human optimization includes all of those facets of your existence because we're holistic beings.
Mm-hmm.
And when we throw it off balance by focusing too hard in one area, it really does cause physical symptoms. It causes problems in your life, physical and spiritual problems. So is there anyone on your show who has said something that was like, gave you this really wow moment, that a huge epiphany that you had on your show? What was like the most crazy or impactful thing anyone's ever said?
I've told this story a few times, but I think it's an important story because it's a story about one guest. The guy who came on, people will know his name. His name's Anthony Scaramucci. But the point is, he came on really early on in the show, and he told me something that has been echoed across many guests. And I think it's one of the more important ideas that has impacted my life and has impacted the lives of probably many people that we look at who are considered successful. Basically, I asked him, what gives you the confidence to go out every single day and do what you do? And to give context, Anthony Scaramucci, he's a big finance guy, very successful. He's probably known in some circles because he was Trump's original director of communications for 12 days in his first presidency. But ultimately, his whole career is revolved around finance, and he's been very successful outside of that. And he answered, he said, listen, Scott, I have unbelievable confidence in myself and my own ability. And if I could go back to my apartment in Brooklyn with nothing except the shirt on my back, no connections, no money, no relationships, and I have absolute confidence that I could do what I've done again and again and again, no matter how many times I had to restart. And the guy's worth like several $100 million at this point over his career. And I think that concept of almost delusional self-belief, as well as agency, belief that you have complete control over outcomes, both good and bad, I think that's a beautiful idea. And I think that's one of the most impactful ideas, because I think that's a precursor for most people to take the action they have to take. Because to take action, you have to have belief that it's going to work out. More often than not, it's the fear of failure that stops people from pursuing anything. But if you do have belief in yourself, I say delusional self-belief, but to a degree, belief in yourself in the sense that whatever problems come up, whatever things don't work out, you have belief in yourself to figure it out. You have belief in yourself to figure out and solve for that problem and to push through and to get to the other side of it. When you have that level of belief, I think that is the first stepping stone on the road to whatever you want to achieve or build. So that idea in particular was very impactful for me. And I think that it couples with the idea of why should I have this self-belief in everything that I do, and why should I believe that I impact my own outcomes? Because I also believe that anybody who you look up to, who's already done the thing you want to accomplish, they're not special. They're really no different than you. They've struggled just as much. They've struggled probably more. They've failed more. All the cliche entrepreneurial tropes are 100% correct. But anybody who you look up to who's the 0.01% in whatever field you're trying to pursue, they're not special. They just went through all the motions. They went through all the iterations. They went through all the reps to get there. So when you realize that person's not special, and the only difference is they've been doing it for longer, figuring it out for longer, failed more than you, and then you have belief in yourself to go through that same journey as they do, I think it's a very empowering idea. So that would be my number one.
Okay, I agree with you. It's interesting that you chose to talk about Anthony Scaramucci, who is somewhat of a controversial figure. And that kind of leads into the next question. Is that idea of self-confidence and self-belief and not caring what other people think. Mm-hmm. And there have been people that I've wanted to speak to on the show, and I might have held back from asking them. In fact, I have an episode with someone that I never published because I was worried that it would be too controversial. So how do you feel about guests that might have a controversial message?
I don't mind. First of all, just one point. Anthony Scaramucci was the first person to bring up that idea on my show, but that idea of agency and self-belief has been echoed in almost any quote unquote successful person. But to your point, like, what do you do when you have somebody with potentially spiky points of view and controversial opinions? So I think, first of all, you have to understand you have to understand what is the objective, the medium that you've created. So I think that just to bring on controversial points of view for controversial points of view's sake, if your goal is to inspire or to motivate or to educate, that does not serve your goal. For me, if I bring on somebody who is highly political and they just trash the other side, is that really educating, inspiring, or teaching anything? No, it's really not. For me, that's not useful. Now, if I bring on somebody that has a spiky point of view that is educational or inspiring or motivating, but maybe it runs conflict to what a lot of people believe, I think that it's important to give them the opportunity to spread that message, but also push back on things so that they have the opportunity to clarify and give context. Because I don't believe in silencing opinions. I've never believed that. I think that there's wisdom in almost, probably get hated on for saying this. I think there's a lot of wisdom if you look for it in a variety of different ways when somebody has an opinion that conflicts with your own. I think that you can understand how people think, how they process information, how they form argument. But also, if you press and you push back, a lot of the time you'll uncover things and ideas that are actually quite prolific, and it shows you how they've shaped their worldview. So again, on my show, I don't do a lot of like highly controversial stuff. But if somebody has a spiky point of view, I think it's important to bring that view to the world and then give them the opportunity to provide context so that they can, hopefully in a well-meaning way, give over that idea in a complete way to the audience and let the audience judge for themselves whether or not that's a useful idea. But that's a tough question. That's a very tough question because there's always a line and you have to decide if you want to cross that line. But when you cross that line, I think that's when you do not have a clear idea of where you want your content to go. So if, for example, I'm a business, motivation, inspiration, and educational podcast, and I bring on nothing but political thought leaders, like I don't have a clear North Star where I want my content to go. And then I've basically just reformatted the entire podcast. So I think you have to know first and foremost what you want to achieve with your content, and then that's what should guide your decisions.
Your mission and your vision for what you want your platform to represent and what you want it to be. I love that because there are many people who I would love to speak to, and I love going down rabbit holes. I love talking about things that are not, and I think that's becoming a little bit less scary to do these days. So
I don't think so. I think there's two ideas here. So going down rabbit holes and going deep on topics that are uncomfortable, I think that's important because I think people are tired of surface level information. Bringing up and bringing on people that are controversial just for controversy's sake. If the sky's blue, they say it's purple because they know that's going to get more clicks. Mm-hmm. I don't see value in that. I do see value in people that have educated opinions and bringing them on and helping unpack those opinions so people can see how they think and how they came to that conclusion. But if somebody is really just argumentative, if somebody is counterculture with no research and no rationale, I don't think that's useful.
I agree.
Give me the example of, I'm curious about the example of your guest.
The one that I didn't publish.
You don't have to name the name, but what was
I won't.
What was
it's
the
not
issue?
A famous person, but it was, okay, I'll say it. It was a person who happens to be a trans person. Okay. And it's someone I knew personally. And I thought it was a really interesting story. And I loved speaking to this person. But it was right at the beginning of when this issue started to gain traction as a very divisive issue. And I made the decision that my show was not about division. And I do think that this guest and I disagreed about certain things, and we were able to talk about these things and shine light on issues and conversations that are valuable, and particularly in light of that issue and in the conversations that have gone on around that. But I just wasn't brave enough to put it out. And I felt bad afterwards. I never really even spoke to them about it. I just didn't air it. And I think maybe I was a chicken. I don't know. What do you think?
I think that, again, if most of your conversations are around business, and I'm assuming that's what
mine are around lifestyle, storytelling, lessons that you learn in life. I talk a lot about entrepreneurship, but also about spirituality and also about wellness. Okay. And it runs the gamut.
So I think that how the conversation was packaged would determine whether or not it's useful for your audience. And as the host, because I've also found this a few times, I have to be a little bit more rigid in how I package the show, because somebody can be controversial if you let them just go off. But if you structure the show around an idea that you know resonates with your audience, that means you just have a unique perspective and a unique story that even if a lot of people in the audience have not experienced, that could be very valuable. But the same person who could be valuable could also be completely useless for the audience as well. Depends on how you package it. So I think that's more in the art of structuring the interview. Because if you bring on a trans person and they discuss their lived experience and the journey they went on and the hardships they've overcome, and that could be very useful. That could be very inspirational for people. If you bring on a trans person and all they're talking about is political policies and why they hate this person and that person, all the things that they're doing wrong, that's really not teaching anyone anything. That could be a fraction of their lived experience for your audience, but it's not useful to create an hour and a half of content around that if that's not what your audience is expecting, because they're expecting all these great educational, uplifting messages. And then all of a sudden, out of nowhere, you have this highly politicized conversation. And I think that for podcasters out there, I think setting expectations ahead of time with the guest, I think is very important. Some guests will always slot right into the listener avatar who you want to serve. Not all guests do, but after doing hundreds of interviews, there hasn't been a single guest where I've said, for example, this is the audience that we're serving. These are the types of topics that are useful and helpful to them. I haven't had a single guest try and sabotage that. Most guests want to show up for the audience. And yes, maybe they don't bring up certain things that are top of mind for them, but if it doesn't serve the audience, it's not going to be a well-received episode anyways. And not to say those topics aren't important. It's just you have to know the medium and you have to know the audience that you're speaking to. So I don't think there's anything wrong with having a controversial person on, because being able to speak about your ideas and your thoughts, especially if it's in a way that serves the audience that you're speaking to, I think is a very important thing. And I think that different opinion or that different perspective can actually add a layer of depth to your show. But of course, you have to make sure that it stays focused on what your audience actually cares about. But that's all content. I think that's all content. I think that's very important. I think that if I see this a lot, by the way, I see a lot of podcasters dive into like highly controversial political topics, even though that wasn't the original thesis of their show, just because it gets more clicks and it gets more comments and it gets more controversy. And then that leads to more dollars. Nothing wrong with that. If that's the direction you want to take your content, I would just say do it purposefully. So make that decision as the creator to move in that direction. Don't let a guest move your show in that direction. without your consent, if that makes sense.
Yes, definitely. It's an interesting thing. And I made the conscious decision at that time that I didn't want to create any more pain around that issue. And I certainly didn't want to be associated with any divisive topic. And although it was a really great story, and I loved showcasing the journey of this person,
Yeah.
ultimately deciding not to air it just because I feel like a lot of it had to do with the fact that I lacked the confidence. But on the other hand, I'm not going after clicks. I'm not going after that controversy. I avoid controversy and negativity because it's uncomfortable for me. But there is value in having uncomfortable conversations.
I agree. I think that it's important. I think that's actually why people love podcasts as a medium. That's why they love long form content where you have this casual conversation, no BS, no, you can't script it and edit it the same way as if you're consuming content on TikTok where you're watching a 45-second talking point that's highly edited down. People like conversation. People like context and nuance. And that's why this medium is so popular. I think that's really why.
I'd rather take a whole day or a few days to listen to a long podcast. I started listening to Lex Friedman that way.
Yeah, and he does long.
Super
like
long. And I love that because like you said, you can't hide anything in a 3-hour interview. And people get to know the real person on the other end of the microphone.
Yeah. Yeah. I don't know. I'd have to listen to the episode, but
I'll see. I don't know if it will ever see the light of day, but perhaps.
but also I think that again, you don't create purposeful divisiveness if that's not your goal.
No.
Because some podcasters, that is their goal. But it's tough without listening to the content. But I also think that most creators in general, err too much on the side of caution. And they're so scared about getting canceled still that their content doesn't have any meat to it. It doesn't have any real substance to it. And it could be with an interview. It could be with the stuff that they film when they film themselves. I think that the whole point of podcasting and content in general is to get, your opinion, your point of view, your personality. When everyone says be authentic, it means bring your whole self to your content. And by the way, Sun Yi speaks about this all the time. Look at what's the name of his show? Authentic as Fuck.
Authentic as Fuck.
Yeah, that's the name of his show. So I think that bringing a spiky point of view and a perspective that you stand behind is a good thing. And I think that also lets people challenge your point of view, which is healthy debate is how we educate and how we learn. Like to not bring up issues means that we're almost like ignorant to the facts and we're ignorant to other ideas and opinions. And when we're ignorant, that's what creates divisiveness and hate. It's not having great conversations and understanding someone else. It's when we ignore their points and we mute them and we shut them off and we live in these echo chambers of similar thought. That's what creates anger and hate and divisiveness. More conversations like across the aisle or with different opinions or perspectives, I think it actually creates cohesiveness and it shows that everybody, even if you don't agree with 100% of their beliefs, is still a human at the end of the day. And I think that I believe that most of the hate and the anger in society is because social media does not show you the other individual's humanity. It shows you the most rage-baity opinions that somebody has, and it silos you in people that have similar opinions as you. And that little echo chamber silo, that's all the information you get. And you have your own belief system being revalidated again and again. So you never get access to other information. And that's what creates all this animosity. So I think that when you have the opportunity to bring another idea, again, if it serves your audience and it's in line with what they're expecting, I don't think it hurts that much. I think it's a benefit.
I agree with you, but I know there are a lot of people who hold back on even just talking about long form shows, but just even a social media post. I'll see people say all the time, "Oh, my mom's going to see that," or "I wish my family didn't follow me on social media." They just hold back from saying what they really want to say. Why is that a detriment?
So I think that it depends on what your views are. Let me preface with that, right? I think that there's a couple different reasons why people hold back because they don't want certain groups to see it. First of all, for parents, that's tough for me to figure out because I've never really been too concerned. My views are not so extreme that my parents are going to look down on me. But even then, at the same time, I don't mind if my parents have a different point of view than me. Like we've always had a very good relationship where we can be super candid with views of what we think and what we believe in. And I think that's a healthy relationship. So maybe if somebody doesn't have that level of candor with their friends or their family or their parents, maybe it's a little bit harder. But I think that speaks more to maybe work on that relationship so you can have that level of candor with the people that are closest to you, because you don't want to be, I don't know, you don't want your whole life to be hiding how you're doing, what you believe from the people that you love the most. That's a horrible way to live a life. I'd rather be authentic with the people, especially the people that are closest to me, even if we don't agree on everything 100%. And there's like times like politically when me and my parents don't agree 100%, me and my brother don't agree 100%, but it's not like we don't love each other.
Yeah.
It doesn't really impact me that way. I think that if it does, then you should work on maybe having a little bit more candor with your parents and your family and your friends. The reason why a lot of creators hold back is because they don't want to lose their income, right? That's the main reason. They don't want their sponsorships to be canceled because they don't want their customers to run away. And the truth is, for a lot of creators, there are more creators than sponsorship dollars. So if you do have an incredibly strong perspective on something and you vocalize it, you speak about it, some of your advertisers or your partners, they're going to find other places to spend their money. And the biggest issue, and this is why I'm telling you as a creator, if you want to be divisive and you want to bring in all these different topics and it's not what your content is today, you are going to have to go through this dry spell between where you are now and where you're going to end up. And don't just step a toe into divisiveness, go all the way in. Because if you don't go all the way in, then you're not going to attract that tribe of people that really believe that thing. And then you're going to also alienate your existing base. So this is my point. I think you have to understand what you want to stand for. And if you want to let's just be very explicit. If you want to be a staunch Democrat or you want to be a staunch Republican, and that's all you want to speak about, and that's your perspective, like, I don't think that you should be a business podcast and bring in Republican ideology every once in a while, not because there's anything wrong with Republican ideology, because it doesn't serve what you're trying to accomplish. So you're going to alienate some of your base. You're going to alienate some of your sponsors that really are your lifeblood. And then you're not really becoming this conservative political pundit. So then you're not tapping into that base and you're not attracting sponsors that cater to that demographic. So you're just shooting yourself in the foot and you're not reaping the benefits. So if you're going to go into politics, go all the way into politics. If you're not, it doesn't serve you. Now, I think every once in a while, it's okay to have a little bit of a perspective or a point of view. But if you're building an audience, understand what the audience is all about and what they want from you. And then that's what you're trying to serve to them. I think that you can bring in your personality, you can bring in your lived experience. But if somebody signs up for business content and then they're getting nothing but political content all day, it's not helping you out. So that's probably why people are a little bit sheepish about speaking about their opinions, because they don't want to lose money. That's usually it.
Yeah. Or they don't want to lose friends. But none of my friends, and I have friends who are, and politics is usually the thing that people are concerned about. Or like just cultural issues. But most of my friends, even if they have different beliefs and different belief systems and different political ideologies, we have great conversations and we have healthy debate. And if I had somebody in my life who, because of one point of view that I have, because one point of view is not your entirety as a person, right? One point of view, just one point of view. If I had a person in my life who was so offended by one point of view that I had, I don't know how I would consider them a friend. Those are not the people that I want to surround myself with. I want to surround myself with people who are critical thinkers, who like to debate, who like to have great conversations, go deep, understand issues in a nonpartisan way, understand not left wing, right wing, but like the totality of an issue, and have a conversation about that. And like I said, if somebody's just judging me from one point of view that I have, I don't think we're going to mesh well as friends, because that's not the kind of personality that I am. And I can't respect somebody
who judges somebody based on one point of view. And if I can't respect you, it's very hard for me to be your friend. Yes, I understand what you're talking about, and you don't want to lose your friends. But I think that also, listen, some of the friends that we've made over our life, they have not, how do I say this politely? There was a point in time where maybe when we were at an earlier season of our life, they were great friends. But if they do not evolve and they do not upskill and they do not try and become better versions of themselves, and they're not on the same journey that you're on, I don't know if they're always meant to be your friend.
Friendships aren't necessarily meant to last a lifetime. Any relationship, no relationship.
No, so
lucky people do have that lifelong relationship with one or two special people. But beyond that, most of us don't. It's not the
if
reality.
someone's judging you for your views who was a friend in high school, I don't know. Maybe you should find people that are more suited to where you're at.
Yeah, more aligned.
Yeah.
How would you like to get the best text of your life? This is your sign that it's time to add something powerful to your morning routine that sets you up for success and reminds you that you are worthy and makes you unstoppable. It's a motivational text message from me, a real human. I am Mitzi Campbell, a mindset specialist, and I know that it is possible for you to live the life of your dreams. My morning motivational text messages help you up-level your mindset, your happiness, and your success. Sign up for a 2-week free trial at yourpositivemoment.com and change your life today. Join the movement so we can all thrive together. yourpositivemoment.com. It's interesting you talk about that.
By the way, these are very tough. These are tough conversations.
I know we went so not where I thought we were going to go, but it's good.
It's because I think that these are real questions that people have. And
yes, they do.
Not the issue, but the tough part about all of these conversations is they're so personal and they're so like emotionally charged, like making decisions about who your friends are and who you spend time with. Yes, you can try and be friends with everybody, but if it doesn't serve you and you have to shut off 90% of your personality or your ideas when you're around that person, it's going to sound harsh, but why are you spending time around that person? Because you're not even being authentic to them. But again, these are tough ideas because these are uncomfortable ideas. Growth is always uncomfortable. Growth in your relationships, growth in your business, growth in physical life, going to the gym, spiritual life, growth in anything is very uncomfortable because that means quite literally you're shedding off the old version of yourself and you're evolving into something new. So if the people that you surround yourself with are not also growing, then the person that they became friends with is no longer the person that you are.
Yeah, I know. We have to stop framing that as a sad thing or a bad thing.
I agree.
It's normal. And what you said about the importance of self-belief ties into that because in order to really believe in yourself at that level, you have to know yourself and you have to be willing to say to about yourself, this is who I am right now. Maybe I was someone else years ago and now I'm this person. And just always be reevaluating that, doing that self-inquiry and then being strong enough to stand up and represent yourself as who you are in that moment, even if it's different from the person you knew in the past.
That's very interesting, right? So you evolve as a person, but then you're so scared. You're so scared of who you've become that you almost diminish yourself to fit someone else's standard of who you used to be. So you've evolved, you've done great things, you've leveled up. And then when you go back around certain people, for that period, for that moment, you like devolve and you reverse because you're so ashamed of what they're going to think of the new person. If you actually think about it, that's absolutely ridiculous. You've done all this work. You've learned all these new things. You put so much time and energy into being this person who you're now proud of to 90% of the world. But then to your parents, to your friends from high school and college and university, whenever you see them, you regress into who you were 10 years ago. Why would you do that? Why are you afraid of being who you put so much work and time and energy into being this new person? Why are you afraid of showing that off? Listen, I'm not a psychologist. There's probably a lot of reasons why people act this way. But I think that I think a lot of these problems would probably be solved. I think that if you speak about what you believe in and what's important to you and the journey that you've been on, I find that all these people that maybe have only known you in an earlier version of yourself, I think that they're actually very receptive to your change. I think it's usually that you're in your own head about it and you feel ashamed for some strange reason. But if you have communication, you have great communication, and you speak to them about like where you're at and where you're going and what you believe in, I think that you'll start to filter through people that you probably shouldn't be in your life, but also build better relationships and better bonds with people that should be in your life. I found I've been speaking about my own experience. I'm not the same person, obviously, I was 10 years ago and 20 years ago. And there's been times where I've been, I don't know, I felt weird about keeping parents up to date on where I'm at in my life and what I'm doing and what I'm taking on and how business is going. But it's a Kim Scott book, right? Radical Candor. It's meant for business, but I think it applies to all areas of your life. The more candid you are with people who you want to keep relationships with, you find that they get on board and they're very supportive and happy for you. And if they aren't, then that's a really great sign that maybe they're not meant to be in your life anymore.
That's true. Very true. Along the lines of having healthy debate and arguments, I wanted to bring up the situation that came up for me once and see what you think about it.
Okay.
I remember having an argument with someone about the idea of, quote, paying your dues. So my argument was, you don't have to jump through all those old hoops that everyone before you jumped through. You could actually be successful. You can get what you want. You can achieve your dreams quickly in a lot of cases. And there's not really a need to like self-flagellate or suffer. And I know you've said this, the greatest lie of entrepreneurship is that you need to suffer. So why do we buy into that lie? And why is this so controversial? Why do people get mad about that?
I'm not sure why people get mad. I think people get mad about it because secretly they're jealous and they're resentful that they weren't able to move faster in their own career. I think that's the only reason. I think to me, that's such an obvious and simple answer to that. Because if somebody is telling you you have to pay your dues because you're moving faster than they moved, they're just mad that they didn't figure it out at the same speed or velocity that you figured it out. Mm-hmm. And I also think that's another signal that you should not keep those people around, because people that you want around are absolutely fucking thrilled when you win.
Yeah.
They're absolutely thrilled. And when they're doing even better than you, for example, I started my podcast and I got advice from somebody who has been podcasting for 5 or 6 years. And then my podcast is bigger than theirs now. Like, I want that person to be like, awesome, congratulations. Like you killed it. You absolutely killed it. I'm so happy for you. And now we have this great relationship, and now there's ideas that I have that could help that person and vice versa. And you want these people to keep pushing you to be better, keep pushing you to move faster. But they also know that because you have this relationship, if you win, there's going to be parts of your journey that's going to help them win to an even greater degree. So it's like this reciprocal back and forth kind of relationship that I think is so beautiful. And most of the people in my life, they would be thrilled, absolutely thrilled, if somehow in a shorter period of time, I was able to achieve what they achieved. It's hard, obviously. Paying your dues is really just, some things are hard to accomplish in a short period of time. So you end up having to spend a little bit of time doing them. But if you can find a way or a strategy or learn from somebody who's done it before to fast track, to not have to go through all the BS they went through, I think that's a beautiful thing. That's half the reason why we create podcasts, right? We interview people so that hopefully somebody who's earlier on in their journey doesn't have to reinvent the wheel. That's literally why we do what we do. That's definitely why I do what I do. I love it. I absolutely love the idea of somebody not struggling with all the stuff and the ideas and the scarcity mindset and all the things that most people struggle with when they start out, outside of the actual pure tactics to do the thing. So I think it's resentment, and I think it's a signal that those people should not be in your life.
Yeah. In that case, she's no longer in my life. But interesting. And you bring up this point that I've been thinking about lately. You have to be willing as a mentor and someone who's an educator to be open to the idea that the people you're teaching might surpass you. They might actually get better than you. And that takes a lot of humble it takes a humble approach, doesn't it?
I think it does take a lot. Yeah, it's humble, but I think it also means that, listen, I'll give you an example. So there is somebody who I helped him start a podcast, and now his podcast does better than me. It's more downloads, does financially better than me. And my podcast as well, but he grew his very hard worker. Like, and now he helps me out with some stuff too. And I still help him out with new things that I discover. And I've been nothing but happy for him. In fact, I'm happy that the way that I look at it is twofold. First of all, I'm happy that I'm so proficient that I was able to give a little bit of advice that allowed him to build something that was not only commercially viable, but highly successful. I'm like, okay, maybe I do know what I'm doing, because I can definitely help somebody get from 1 to 2 in podcast land. But also, now I have this great relationship. He's very grateful. And now he's going to learn things and get access to even people, advertisers, ideas, partners that could help me. It's the exact situation I just described. I've never felt like an ounce of resentment, because it doesn't matter to me if he's winning. Because like, why would I? Because there's people like Joe Rogan and Tim Ferriss, and now there's Stephen Bartlett and Chris Williamson with Modern Wisdom, and they're killing it. And I had no impact on any of their lives or careers. So wouldn't it be fun to just say, hey, listen, I know enough that I helped this guy get off the ground, and look at what he's doing now. And I have a relationship with somebody who's absolutely killing it in their field. That's such a fun idea. Because regardless of whether, if I was upset, that would mean that I would be upset about all these other people's success as well, that I had no impact and there was nothing that I did to contribute or detract from. People are going to be successful with or without you. So at least enjoy the fact that if you had a little bit of impact on their life and their journey, you did something good. I don't know. That's the way I think about it. There's so much money and resources and ability to achieve success in this world. I've just never found that anyone else's success has ever detracted from mine.
Absolutely. It doesn't. And it reminds me to beware of mentors or coaches who always want to keep you in a subordinate position. Your people who you work with and form relationships with should, I think of it this way, because I have fallen into the trap of getting involved in programs with people and then realizing, hey, if this person would give me their personal phone number, but if I texted them and said, I'm in town, do you want to have dinner? They wouldn't want to have dinner with me. And that's a big sign about how the person is looking at you and what role you want to play. If you want to achieve success, you want to be careful you're not always keeping yourself in a subordinate position like that.
I agree. And I think that's also why I don't love a lot of gurus. I don't love a lot of online coaches. I think that if you're going to look for, I don't know, everywhere that I've gotten, like anything I've achieved in my career, I've had a lot of mentors, but mentorship takes a lot of different forms. And I think that if people are selling you mentorship, you have to understand their incentives. Mm-hmm. But I have friends that are playing at the exact same level as me, and we learn from each other. I have friends that have friends and mentors that have achieved a little bit further than me that I learn a lot from, because they've just accomplished the thing I want to accomplish. I have people that have achieved 100x what I've achieved, and they're useful for another perspective. But I also get a lot of I also think one of the most underrated sort of ways to learn is to mentor others, because then when you start to teach something, you start to see the gaps in your own knowledge. What you're referring to like more like a professional coach guru that's probably charging you some sort of mastermind fee or monthly retainer or coaching. Yeah. I don't know. They have a place for sure. I just think you have to understand what their incentives are. And also, yes, if you look for signals where they're not happy, if you're moving beyond what they've accomplished and they're not ecstatic, then I would also remove that person from my life. Like the common thread is like remove toxic people who don't want to see you win from your life. That's really the common thread. And that's tough, because you just have to have belief in yourself when you do that, right? You have to have belief that you can figure it out yourself. And there's nothing wrong with coaches, but I just think that there's a lot of garbage in the coaching industry. There is.
Yeah. It's so true. But that's a great question for people just right now to think about, and just look at your closest circle of friends and ask yourself that question. Would they be happy for me if I won the lottery tomorrow? Would they be happy for me if whatever it is, if I had achieved some kind of great success, would they be cheering me on, or would they be cringing a little?
And everyone who is in my life right now, everyone who I've either paid to mentor or just mentors because we're close friends and they like to help out with any sort of question or issue that's come up in my life. Everyone has been incredibly happy with any sort of accomplishment that I've achieved. In fact, I'm probably harder on myself and I don't celebrate my wins as much as I should, which is, I think, like a very common trait of high performing people. But they like to celebrate my wins, which is also like a good sign. So,
That's a beautiful thing.
yeah.
If there is someone out there listening who is just getting started in entrepreneurship, maybe they are later in life and they've made a pivot later in life and they're just starting to build, they have a small audience. How can you leverage at the beginning a small audience for someone who's brand new, dipping their toes in?
So I think that first of all, if you're going to start with entrepreneurship, I think that you want to de-risk it as much as possible. And I think that before you even start to build an audience, just one point on just starting out, I think that you don't go all in until you have proven product market fit or you have an idea that really resonates with the market. Meaning, like, you don't quit your job and depend on 3 months of saved income to pay your bills and your rent before you jump into it. But after that, if you work your 9 to 5 and then you build your startup or you become an entrepreneur in your 5 to 9 and on the weekends, building an audience is a very powerful thing because you can validate ideas, you can start to sell your product or service. The first idea is you have to be super clear on your customer avatar and your ideal customer profile. So you have to understand exactly who your product is for. Because if you just build an audience for an audience's sake and just to get followers, that's not going to be useful. So you want to build an audience intentionally. So that means that the content you're creating is answering questions that your ideal customer profile or customer avatar would be asking about your product or service. And obviously there's different ways to do this, that you can do video, you can do podcasts, you can write on Substack, you can post stuff on Instagram, but you want to be very clear about who your customer avatar is and really just write it down. Say, hey, I sell X service. Say I want to do like social media marketing. I sell social media marketing to CEOs or CMOs in companies between $10 to $15 million in revenue with 30 to 40 employee headcount based in the US in these particular verticals. Be very specific about who that avatar is because that will inform your content. Because you asked, how do you leverage an audience? You have to build the right audience first, because if you just build an audience, it's very hard to leverage them. But if you build the right audience, you don't need a huge audience for that to be a huge commercial asset to the business that you're building. So once you figure out your ideal customer profile / avatar, it's the same thing. Then you start to structure content around the questions that avatar would be asking. So you can go to it's Answer the Public or Ask Socrates.
Yeah.
These are great tools to see. What both of those tools do is if you type in a subject, it'll show you the highest searched queries based on like Google, like how many people are searching for this particular question for that subject. And that's a great way to start forming your content. So now you have a list of like 20 or 30 questions that the CMO of a $10 million company based in the US is asking about social media. Okay, start there. And you start creating content in that style. And then I would also say, in terms of content formats, look for people that are doing what you're doing and have large audiences or a lot of engagement, and then you can emulate that format. So there's a few different styles of content that work really well. So once you figure out the actual topics based on the ideal customer profile, then figure out the actual format. And there's formats that I would say are a little bit more viral in nature. One of them that you see a lot is a guy walking down the street doing like a listicle, filming himself. That's one. Mm-hmm. Another one that you see works really well is when you have one creator that's like pretending to be two people in a conversation, speaking about a particular topic. That's another one that does very well. You can also do long form content like podcast, and then you can clip it up. As long as the long form is answering questions that your ideal customer profile or avatar would be asking, then all the derivative content, all the clips that you pull from that are going to be pretty relevant. So then you figure out your content format and the style, start blocking off time for content creation, and then just start posting. And then the audience you're going to attract will be your customer that you're going to be selling to. And if you do this properly, put a link in bio. I would say do 90% of your content educational or entertaining. And then like 10% of it can be, this is what I do. Contact me if you want to learn more about this. Mm-hmm. That's how you will leverage a small audience for your business. Because the people who are following you are, in theory, the people who would be buying your product or service. And when you create an audience like that, you don't need a huge following. Because if
What
you,
role do you think age plays in that in content creation?
I don't think it plays an age. I think it plays no age. I think age plays no,
No role.
I think age plays no role. Excuse me. I've seen creators that are 60, 70 create content and just post it and build massive followings.
Yeah. So there shouldn't be a fear of getting left behind
No,
for older people.
no, not at all. I'm gonna, oh, I don't have my phone on me. You know what? Oh my God. So a good example of somebody who's killing it, who is not super young. I don't know how old he is. Let's just say he's 50. I think he's older than that, but let's just say he's 50. I'm pretty sure he is older than that. So go look at Robert Croak's content.
Okay.
Robert Croak was the founder of a company called Silly Bands. And he sold that company, or sold a portion of it. He made quite a bit of money. And now he goes viral on TikTok for walking down the street talking about finances, personal finances. And he has like huge social media following.
I follow him.
Yeah. He's not old, but he's not young. He's not 20 years old. Another guy, Mark Tillsbury. Mark Tillsbury is another dude who's I'm sure he's at least 70. And he's been an entrepreneur his whole life. And he does it the style. So Robert Croak does the walking down the street, filming himself listicle content. Mark Tillsbury does the speaking, one creator speaking to themselves, like edited, like it's a conversation style of content. And both of them have massive followings. And then a third one, Simon Squibb. So he's also, I'm sure, over 50. Simon Squibb does the man on the street style interview where he walks around to people and he says, "Do you have a dream?" So so now I could also tell you about the guys from School of Hard Knocks, who I'm pretty sure are like mid-20s, who do the exact same style content as Simon Squibb, but they both have massive audiences. It's not about age.
Yeah.
Once you understand, again, if you understand the customer you're selling to, you understand the style of content you understand the topics you want to discuss, you understand the style of content that is received by the market well, meaning man on the street, walking listicles, self-interview. These are just names that I'm making up for them. And then you actually create consistently. That's all it takes. There's no age barrier to doing any of this stuff. It's just being as formulaic and as purposeful in your content creation as you are with the rest of your business. And it doesn't mean that every piece is going to go viral, but if you follow this strategy that I just laid out, you're already going to be better than I would say like 99% of the content creators who just throw shit at the wall and hope something sticks.
Yep.
Or content creators that are optimizing for the wrong audience. Because I can tell you how to create content that goes viral and you're just building an audience that doesn't serve your business at all. And then what are you chasing? You're chasing vanity metrics. Another style of content that does very well, Mark Shapiro, he does reaction videos to viral business content. So he'll do like a stitch, I think that's what it's called, where you play a clip of a very viral business idea. It could be somebody like Grant Cardone or even like an Andrew Tate or like anybody who has like a comment on business or money or whatever. And then he'll react to it. Not always like in a good way. Like sometimes he'll be like, "This is the worst advice I've ever heard," but he'll react to it. So then you already have a baked in viral component into your video because you know the original thought went viral, and then you're the beneficiary of that on your own Instagram page. And I'm sure he's also like mid-60s. He's not a young guy. None of these people are young. They just figured out the formula that works.
Yeah.
That's all it is.
Yeah. It's just, I think there's potential that exists in the universe as an unlimited like resource. We should have that awareness and understanding that it can happen on a dime and it doesn't matter how old you are. And it's interesting to talk about what you're saying, these formulas and studying the avatar and how much of it is that data-driven stuff and how much of it is your passion.
That's an interesting question. I think it can be both. I don't mean to cop out on that answer, but I think that if your passion is your business and you have a data-driven formula to create content that drives results for your business, then I think that you're going to be very passionate about your content because it's going to make you money. I think that if you want to speak about other topics, that's fine because that will be energy that you're going to put into content that it won't hurt, but it won't help your business to the same degree. So I think that, for example, if I was going to be very specific about driving leads for my business, I would emulate one of those 4 formulas. Now, if I wanted to have a long form podcast where I have great conversations like this, Maybe it doesn't serve my business as well, but maybe it's something that I really enjoy. And maybe there's other benefits to having an hour and a half conversation with a really cool person. Maybe it's to expand my network, whatever it is. You can include that. It will still help. It will still help to a degree, but it won't be as targeted. I think both. I think both can exist. But I really do believe that when you find a formula that prints money for your business, you will out of nowhere start to become very passionate about that kind of content because it's achieving the objective that you care about. I think that the hardest part is not passion. I think the hardest part is, if you're going to talk about an older crowd that did not grow up with social media, it's just getting over your own mental hurdles in creation and getting over, I feel like I'm an idiot. Do I look stupid? Do people judge me? I don't want to go interview people on the street. Oh, it's so stupid. I'm editing this so it looks like I'm having a conversation with myself. You got to get over your own ego. Like, all content is getting over your own ego. Nobody cares. If you've ever heard about there's an idea called the spotlight effect. And the spotlight effect is that we all think that people are watching us and caring about us more than they are, when they really aren't. They're so involved in their own life and they're so involved in their own stress, and nobody gives two shits about what we're doing on social media. And if they do care, if we get to the point where people care enough, I can guarantee you're making so much money, you don't care about the negative opinions. It would be a blessing for people to care that much about what you're doing on social media. Get over yourself. Doesn't matter what age you are. You can do it. It's not like there's not a huge barrier to entry with all the tools and the technology that we have available now. And you will find passion in it. If building your business is what you're passionate about, you would find just as much passion in content creation as you would at mastering Facebook ads. Mastering Facebook ads is not something that anybody's passionate about until it drives tons of revenue for your business and customers for your business. And all of a sudden, you're an entrepreneur and you can quit your job and you've achieved freedom and you can take care of your family. Then all of a sudden, you're very passionate about Facebook ads, right? So I think you have to understand, in life, what are you trying to achieve? What's the objective? Why are you becoming an entrepreneur? Why are you creating content in the first place? And when you understand that, then it's all a means to an end. And that's what I believe, at least. And I think that's why all these guys, like all the guys I just mentioned, they did not grow up with social media. It's not like they were in school posting on TikTok when they were a kid, but it drives results for them. And now they're very passionate about it. They're very passionate about it because it's serving what they want to achieve in the world.
I love that. I love that. And you brought it full circle, talking about self-belief again, and also bringing it back to the idea of having your mission statement, like having your idea of what is my clear vision and mission for what I'm doing. It's really all comes down to.
You always need that, because if you don't, entrepreneurship is hard. Anything worth doing is hard, but entrepreneurship in particular is very hard. I find that entrepreneurship is actually not that complicated. The steps that you have to take to build something, you can find them. You can find somebody else who's done the thing that you're trying to do to some degree. I think that it's a lot of work, regardless. Even if you know all the steps, it's going to be a lot of work. And if you do not have a bigger vision or purpose or mission than just money, I think that it's very hard to maintain motivation through all of those really difficult all-nighters, customers upset, you have to let go of an employee, like all these horrible things that you just have to deal with when you're an entrepreneur. And then once you get a little bit bigger, you'll have lawsuits, you'll have all this stuff. This is just like how business, eventually all this stuff happens at some point, and it's stressful. So how do you keep going through all of these very difficult things? I think that you have to have a bigger purpose and a bigger vision as to why you're even wanting to do this, because you can have a very comfortable life working a 9-to-5. You can be very strategic about your career and you can get a very good salary and a very good quality of life. You want to make money? Go back to school, get a computer engineering degree, and then go work for FANG. Go work for Facebook, Apple, Amazon, Netflix, Google. You'll be pulling in $500,000 to $1 million plus a year, and you'll be working 40 hours a week. You'll have a great life. An absolutely great life. So there has to be a reason why you want to build the thing you want to build. Because if you were just as strategic about your career as you are about your business, you can make so much money. Money's never the issue. Yeah. Money's never the issue. There's always ways to make more money, but you want to figure out why you're choosing to make it in the way that you're choosing to make it. And that, I think, comes down to, what is your reason for waking up in the morning? Podcasting, by the way, is not a good business.
No,
it's a very difficult business.
I'm aware of that.
If you think about, this is something that I've heard Scott Galloway speak about, and I really like this idea. So podcasting and all these other sexy businesses, they're vanity businesses versus like tax consulting or opening up your own law firm or any kind of business that's just not sexy, that's not vanity. If you look at the top, say 20% of tax consultants or lawyers in the US, most of them are flying private. They're living a pretty good life.
Mm-hmm.
How many podcasters are flying private? Not the top 20%, like the top. If you just want to make money, there's easier ways to make money. But some people want to make money a certain way. Some people feel like, oh, if I'm not going to have a big enough impact as a lawyer. So this is why I want to start a podcast. This is why I want to create content. This is why I want to build a business, because I want to do something bigger. I want to do something sexier. No problem. But when you're on year 4, 5, and 6, and you realize that if you had just started a business or if you'd just gone back to law school, you'd be making 10x what you're making now, then you start to wonder, why am I doing this? So you have to have a bigger vision and a bigger purpose.
Yeah.
And like for me, it's genuinely, I genuinely hope that some of the conversations that I have on my show will help a generation of very ambitious entrepreneurs and entrepreneurs figure out life so that they don't have to pay their dues, right? That's really it. So that they can skip a couple steps and they can achieve whatever their dreams are a little bit quicker than when I achieved mine or when some of the people that I speak to have achieved theirs. That to me has always been very fulfilling. Ever since I was a kid, my first job ever was coaching tennis. I loved coaching. I loved seeing like transformation. To me, that's very fulfilling. There's many ways to make money. That way I really enjoy. And I think that's really what drives me because, as you know, now the podcast as well, but for a long time, if I just started another business, I could have made way more money earlier on. So I don't know, figure out your mission. Don't just jump into entrepreneurship to make money. And once you have your mission or your purpose on this earth, everything in pursuit of that becomes very easy.
Yeah. And you just answered my final question, which is, what are the biggest lessons that you learned in your life? I think you just answered them.
Yeah, there's a lot. Podcasting is great because you get to sit down with some really interesting people and you, again, learn from their experiences. But I would say that biggest lesson is find your mission, find why you want to wake up every single morning. If there's ever a point where you don't enjoy what you're doing anymore, I think that's a really good signal to reevaluate why you're spending so much time and energy on something. But once you do have your mission and your purpose, I think that everything else comes very easy. Because then putting a ridiculous amount of time and energy into something no longer seems like an insurmountable idea. Like now I can put as much time and energy into what I'm doing, like my podcast, my work, and I enjoy it. And I think that's what's required. And also then you can stick with it for a long enough period of time for it to be successful. I'm also a big believer in, if you stick with something for a long enough period of time, if you're a smart person, if you iterate, if you pivot when you have to pivot, if you learn from all the failures, you'll find a way to be successful at it. I don't really think that, and also in life, you only have to be successful once. That's the other beautiful thing. Like you don't have to be successful multiple times. You can, if you commit 10 to 15 years to something, which is it seems like a long time, but it's not. In the grand scheme of your entire life. But if you do commit 10 to 15 years to any business, there's very few people. Yeah, the business isn't going to look the same year 15 as it did on day 1, but there's very few people that haven't found a way to build something exceptionally meaningful in that time frame if they can stick with it long enough and learn from all the things that didn't work. So all these ideas are very important. But I think that when you combine them all, you know how they say in entrepreneurship, you have a 95% failure rate. I think when you combine all these ideas, there's maybe a couple others that we haven't even spoken about. One of them being, if you want to be an entrepreneur, I don't think that just dropping out of Stanford, like and trying to build the next Facebook is the best way to do it. I think that what you should do is you should spend some time in an industry and then find a pain point in that industry that nobody else has ever discovered. And that's another you'll have a really high chance of success. But if you combine all these ideas, plus you're smart about the business that you're building, I actually think that the failure rate is quite low. I think the failure rate is high. We perceive the failure rate of entrepreneurs as high because we don't have the right idea about what it takes. We set the wrong expectations. We don't give it enough time. We don't properly evaluate the product that we want to take to the market. We don't set up our lives so we can stick with it long enough, and we run out of runway, both mentally and financially, before we have time to prove it out. I think all these ideas are important, but when you incorporate all these ideas and you're smart about building something, I think that your chance of success is exceptionally high, and I think your chance of failure is very low.
I love your optimism. I love an optimist. I'm a positivity.
You have to be.
I'm a positivity. And
You have to be.
Thank you.
You have to be an optimist. If the world's things are too difficult not to be an optimist. But also look for not just optimism without any sort of basis in reality. Like, look at people who have built incredible things and understand how much time and energy and effort and iterations they've gone through to build that thing. And you start to realize that even small examples. I remember one time I had a friend, and I'm from Toronto. I had a friend in Toronto who had his parents had how do I describe it? They installed, like, it was like a glass company. They installed the glass on new homes. That was their company. Such an unsexy, you never even think about it industry. And they've been doing it for 20 years. And my God, you should see their house. It was like a mansion. It was just, I had another friend who owned a paper. His business was paper. He would find a way to get these huge commercial accounts and ship them tons and tons of paper. It was like a mansion. It was one of the largest homes I've ever seen. And all these weird, unsexy industries that they just stuck with for a long enough period of time. And they achieved incredible success. Now I'm talking commercial success. I'm sure there's a lot of other markers of success, like we spoke about, that are very important. When people start out, they're usually thinking commercial success. If you stick with it long enough, you'll probably find a way to make enough money that you never have to work again.
It's out there. It's out there for everybody. I love that. Thank you so much for spending this time with me this morning, with all of us. And I absolutely loved this conversation. I feel like we could talk for many hours.
Well, we'll have to do a part 2 one time.
I know. Thanks again, Scott.
My pleasure.
Hey, everybody still listening. Will you go give a 5-star review to this podcast? Mitzi puts in so much effort and so much love into this. She's brilliant. She deserves it. So I am going to go right now. By the way, by the time you hear this and you go give your 5-star review, you should be able to go find my 5-star review of this podcast. But I just want to thank you for what you're doing.